Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating, highly urgent documentary called The Blue Abyss, A Decade to Save Our Oceans. We're going to impartially map out the source material's incredibly detailed data, looking at the massive scale of Earth's marine ecosystems, the terrifying predictions scientists have laid out, and, crucially, the solutions being proposed. I absolutely love breaking down complex systems, and the data presented here is both staggering and absolutely essential to understand. So let's dive right in, shall we? The source sets the stage by noting a pretty fundamental fact. The ocean covers 71% of Earth. It really is the defining feature of our planet. It's this vast, interconnected engine that drives literally everything from our weather patterns to our global food supply. But the physical space is really only half the story. The ocean actually produces 50% of the oxygen we breathe. Let that sink in for a second. Every second breath you take is generated not by trees, but by marine life. It basically makes the ocean an active, breathing lung for the entire planet. And beyond oxygen, it feeds a staggering 3 billion people. 3 billion. It provides the primary source of protein for almost half of humanity, making it our ultimate life support system. But as the documentary points out, this life support system is currently crashing. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the ocean crisis, move into ecosystems collapsing, explore the hidden human cost, map out the 2050 crossroads, and finally look at how we save it. All right, Section 1, the ocean crisis. The source pinpoints the 1970s as a major turning point, and the crisis is captured perfectly in this incredibly stark observation. In just 50 years, the ocean changed more than it did in the previous 5,000 years. The documentary notes that this isn't some gradual shift. It's a sudden, unprecedented shock to an ancient system, brought on by a perfect storm of overfishing, industrial pollution, and climate change. We're seeing a devastating 70% collapse in global fish populations in just half a century. We're talking about events like the Atlantic cod depletion, which was so severe that Canada had to ban the practice entirely, instantly costing 30,000 jobs. Moving on to Section 2. Ecosystems collapsing. So, ocean acidification. It's essentially a slow-motion disaster driven by a deadly chemical chain reaction. Carbon dioxide enters the water, it mixes to form carbonic acid, the pH drops, and as a result, shells literally dissolve. The source highlights these tiny creatures called sea butterflies, and when they dissolve, the fish and whales that eat them starve, collapsing the entire food chain, right from the bottom up. Then there's another invisible killer. Agricultural runoff. It transforms healthy, thriving marine ecosystems into what the source flat out calls dead zones. This happens when agricultural nitrogen runs off into the ocean and causes giant algae blooms. Those blooms die, decompose, and suck all the oxygen right out of the water. There is a totally barren void in the Gulf of Mexico that is the size of Massachusetts, and it's just one of over 400 expanding dead zones worldwide. And to really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the plastic problem, the source reveals that 22,000 tons of plastic are hitting the water every single day. That means whales starving because their stomachs are packed full of plastic, turtles suffocating, and microplastics infiltrating the very fish that eventually end up on our dinner plates. If we track these trends out, we can see exactly when some iconic species are going to be completely erased. The source notes the vaquita, which is the world's smallest dolphin, could be gone in just 5 years. Seahorses, which have been decimated by traditional medicine demands, could vanish by 2040. And the mighty bluefin tuna, already down 96% historically, faces extinction by 2050. These are creatures that evolved over millions of years, just wiped out in a matter of decades. Which brings us to Section 3, the hidden human cost. This collapse creates a massive, fundamental justice issue. When fish populations crash, poor coastal and island nations whose entire economies and diets rely on fish, they face immediate starvation and economic collapse. Meanwhile, wealthy countries, they can just afford to import alternatives. The documentary argues that the poor are essentially paying the ultimate price for the rich's overfishing. Next up, Section 4, the 2050 crossroads. The scientific predictions for 2050 are honestly terrifying. We're looking at waters up to 2 degrees Celsius warmer. Fish populations down by 90%, which means commercial fishing becomes economically impossible. Coral reefs, which support 1 billion people, will be 90% extinct. And those dead zones we talked about, they're projected to expand to over 1,000. It shows an ocean turning into a literal wasteland. Now, you might reasonably ask, If the data is this clear, why on earth aren't we stopping it? Well, the sources pinpoint 5 main human factors. It's driven by a multi-billion-dollar industry's focus on money and maximum catch right now, weak enforcement of international laws, the fact that the ocean's damage is largely out of sight, and of course, our consumer addiction to convenience. We just want cheap fish and fast plastic deliveries without having to see the hidden costs. So we face two starkly diverging timelines as we look toward the year 2100. Future 1, we act now. We regulate fishing, stop pollution, and the ocean heals and thrives. Or Future 2, we do nothing. The food web disintegrates, millions become climate refugees, and according to the text, human civilization collapses.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, How We Save It.
To actually achieve that brighter future, global recovery is going to involve some sweeping, systemic mandates. The source lists protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030 in strictly enforced marine reserves, heavily enforcing those catch limits, and actively reducing our climate emissions. And we know for a fact it works. The text highlights New Zealand's successful fishing bans in huge areas that actually allowed heavily depleted marine populations to successfully rebound. But shifting to the individual level, the source really emphasizes what you and I can do today. This includes actively checking seafood labels to make sure we only buy sustainable fish, or maybe even stopping your fish consumption entirely. It means refusing single-use plastics, voting for politicians who prioritize protecting the ocean, and educating others about the invisible crises happening right beneath the waves. I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn straight from the source material. The ocean fed our ancestors for millennia. It is the absolute foundation of human civilization. We dismantled it in roughly 150 years. Can we manage to save it in the next 25? It's a massive challenge, and it's asking all of us to decide exactly which future we want to build. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredibly important data, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.